Thank you very much. We'll make a start. I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Justin Peet. I am the Head of Futures here at St Leonard's College, and I want to welcome you to the Leonardian Centre tonight at St Leonard's, particularly if this is your first visit to the school. We're delighted to host Paul Burgess, the Director of International Admission and Global Initiatives at Tulane University of Louisiana. Tulane is located in the vibrant city of New Orleans, is a leading private research institution known for its rigorous academic programs and dynamic campus life. It is home to one of the oldest law schools and one of the oldest medical schools in the United States, offering a wide range of undergraduate and graduate programs. As a member of the American Athletic Conference, Tulane also boasts a strong athletic program competing in the NCAA. We're also grateful to have Samantha Jackson here tonight. Samantha is the Education Outreach Manager for Australia at EducationUSA, which operates from the US Consulate General, Melbourne, and we thank her for organising this evening's event. However, before I hand things over to Samantha, I would like to do what is customary when we meet in this place, and that is to acknowledge the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we meet this evening, and pay our respects to the elders past and present and emerging, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are present with us either here or online this evening. Can we please offer Samantha a warm welcome to the stage?
I might bring this down a little bit because you'll learn that Paul and I are not as tall as Justin Peet. To St Leonard's College, thank you so much for hosting us tonight. Thank you for streaming this not only through Melbourne, through Victoria, but also through Australia. It's an absolute pleasure to have Paul Burgess join you today from Tulane University. So not only are you going to learn a little bit about Tulane University, but what you're more importantly going to learn about is the steps to US colleges. The fact that you're in the room, it means you have an interest in the US college pathway. My name is Samantha Jackson. I'm the manager with EducationUSA as their outreach manager in Melbourne. I'm a former Division 1 student athlete that went to Northern Illinois University. You can't see me if you're online, but does anyone know what sport I play? Can you guess? People who have met me before cannot say. So anyone know my sport? So I often hear swimming, softball, soccer, you're a runner. Trust me, I'm not a runner. So I was a Division 1 golfer. And if you are in the room and aspiring to go to a US college where you also can be an athlete and get your academic degree, I don't think there's a better place you can go in the world. If you are sitting in the room and looking for admissions in admissions programs to US colleges, what you're going to learn tonight is that you have an array of choices. But what's really interesting is that admissions directors like Paul talk to families about you finding your best fit. And he's not only going to give you tips about that today, but he's going to give you tips on how you can be writing your application and how you can be sharing your story. Please know that EducationUSA is going to look at running programs every 6 to 8 weeks. We're going to have you follow and hopefully like our EduUSA Australia Facebook page. The young people in the room, please don't cringe. I know that's really, old because you're all Snapchatting or Instagramming, but I work for the US government, okay? And it's hard to, share anything in speed. So that is one way that we can quickly share and communicate with you. And that's where all our programs are advertised, including tonight's programs. Thanks to your own respective schools that have shared this invitation with you. You don't want to hear from me tonight because you can see me at another program. I'm going to bring Paul to the stage. He's got some wonderful information to share with you. We are more than happy to share the PowerPoint that he is presenting tonight, so there is no need to take photos. If you are joining us online, you would have registered. We will get everything to you, be it the PowerPoint and the flyers that are in the audience that they picked up when they arrived. So without any further ado, welcome from New Orleans, welcome to Melbourne. Paul Burgess, take the stage, please.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Samantha. Just a quick housekeeping note. Samantha is going to pass around a registration sheet for those of you who would have pre-registered. As that moves around the room, please just tick your name off so we know you are here and we're able to send you the presentation so you don't have to pull out your phone or iPad and take pictures. Well, as mentioned, my name is Paul Burgess. I'm the Director of International Admission and Global Initiatives at Tulane. It's wonderful to be here and it's wonderful to be back. I attended Tulane myself for my undergraduate and graduate degrees, and I also did my year of exchange here at Melbourne Uni. So it's really nice to be back visiting with friends, experiencing the flat whites as I remember them, and to get to talk to you a little bit about Tulane University. I'll be able to share some of my personal perspective. We'll walk through some of the details of Tulane, but also of similar institutions. There are about 3,500 institutions of higher education in the United States. That is just an overwhelming number beyond belief. So whereas when you're looking at national education institutions, you might be focused on a very short list locally in your home country, it's important to know that institutions in the US, especially those top ones, might just have 1,000 to 2,000 students in their incoming first-year class. And some of those household names that you think of when you think of the US may only have 400 or 500 students in their first year incoming class. With a global education destination that the US is, it takes a lot of different institutions to meet that demand. So even when you think about the top 100 best universities in the US, you're barely scratching 3% of the pool. So there's a lot of places for you to consider, and I'm excited to talk to you about Tulane. We heard a little bit of the history of the university already. Founded as a medical college in the early 1800s, we created the first vaccine for yellow fever. That's sort of where we got our start on the world stage, and we very much stayed at the front of STEM subjects. We created the first rapid test for both Ebola as well as COVID. We have lots of research across disciplines such as aerospace, moving more recently into entrepreneurship. The New Orleans Entrepreneurship Festival is happening in New Orleans this week. So pitch competitions, research across microfinancing, plenty of avenues that take the university's student experience and move it into that sort of practical application sphere. But just to summarize the university a little bit in terms of size, there are about 7,500 undergraduate students on our uptown campus. We have about an equal number of graduate students on some of the other campuses, but all undergraduate students will be spending their 4 years in a very cohesive residential experience. One of the most advantageous parts of a US education is this idea that your education is not just a few hours a day in the classroom, but it's a fully immersive experience, that you're most likely waking up early in the morning, perhaps to have practice for an athletic team. About 70% of Tulane students would be participating formally in athletics, either at the Division I level or a slightly less competitive club level. You'd then be attending classes. You'd take somewhere between 5 and 7 classes in a semester. You'd be going to seminar-based courses. Our average class size is 20 students, so you're not going to be sitting in rooms like this. Even though we're much larger of an institution than St. Leonard's, we really have very few spaces that would hold this many students. The idea is that you sit in a semicircular sort of environment with a professor at the front of the classroom, and you discuss and debate different ideas. Now, those ideas span lots of different subject areas. So just to pull up an image here, you can see the academic breakdown at the university. There are 5 undergraduate schools or colleges at Tulane. So you'll see those listed and highlighted in light blue. So the School of Architecture, the School of Business, the School of Liberal Arts, the School of Science and Engineering, as well as the School of Public Health. Another main differentiation to an American education is this idea of academic flexibility. And I would encourage you, if you remember 2 things about Tulane, I would remember academic flexibility as well as practicality. In terms of flexibility, you apply to the university in general, and if you're admitted, you are equally admitted to pursue a double major in business as well as neuroscience. as you are to spend 2 weeks on campus studying that, and then switch to a degree in chemical engineering with a minor in printmaking. Some of it is trial by fire, right? You would have chosen certain subjects to take in high school, but we do believe if you have a passion for a subject, for a double major or a dual degree, we're here to support you in that endeavor, very much to support you finding the intersection of your interests more than anything, and then help you move through your years to formulate a research question, work on undergraduate research, find a practical application of that in the business world, and then move on to a career. So just for an example, one of the students who has interned in our office had a really strong interest in both computer science and applied mathematics, as well as evolutionary biology. So somewhat disparate areas of interest that you might not immediately be able to combine or foresee how those combine. But they work with one of our most well-published professors who actually uses aspects of mathematic modeling and inputs from climate change to predict changes in migratory patterns of certain species of fish based on the changing climate. And so that's very much a way in which your disparate areas of academic interest can come together and really serve the community around you. Research is ample and well-funded. U.S. institutions can certainly be expensive, but we bring in many more funds than just from tuition, many different grants from the National Science Foundation, other national boards, and you're going to find 93 different research institutes and centers at Tulane. So those are things like the Tulane Brain Institute for Neuroscience, the Payson Center for International Development, amongst many, many others, institutes that focus on political economy, that focus on Latin American studies. We have the largest jazz archives in the nation on our campus. So whether you're interested in music production, music technology, music business, you're going to find lots of ways to apply that, and ways to sort of keep the academic and theoretical component of that. So research universities are there to ensure that the next generation of information is created. Your professors have two jobs. Half of their time is spent working with you in the classroom setting to debate and discuss different ideas, as well as your readings and your projects. But the other half of their job is spent creating that new information that goes into the next set of published textbooks. And so certainly the university prides its reputation and its membership in the AAU, the Association of American Universities, in that rate of publishing from our undergraduate professors. And we do sit within the top 2% of research universities nationwide. Community service is a big part of the university's ethos. I've just spoken to you about some really desirable characteristics that you will find amongst other universities in the sort of top 100 ranking in the US. But I think where Tulane differentiates itself in terms of a culture and an ethos is this way in which social service is applied through the academic curriculum. We were the first university to integrate that into the academic experience, and essentially giving all students an internship with a not-for-profit or a community-based organization where their specific majors tie in and are applied to better the community around them. So that would mean that students studying things like business and accounting would work with recent immigrants to our city who have started their own businesses and are filing their US taxes for the first time. They're helping them file their taxes correctly, but also ensuring that they receive every appropriate deduction. Our architecture students work on designs for sustainable and affordable housing. There's actually a full architecture studio in a student's third year where they put forward a design for this multifamily housing. The top design is selected by a panel of architects and then actually paid for and constructed in the city by the university. This has been happening for over 15 years. There's actually a whole reality series about it, sort of life as an architect working in the city. And so really meaningful ways that you can give back to the community around you. Oftentimes, social service done in a high school setting is about giving of your physical strengths, which is important and wonderful, working in a soup kitchen or Habitat for Humanity or something like that. But once you're at the academic level to attend a university like Tulane, you have a lot to give of your mental strengths as well. So we want to ensure that you're taking the practicality of that biology degree, of that chemical engineering degree, and finding a way to use it to the betterment of others around you. I think that's a larger scale where this practical application of study comes through as well. Some of our certain subjects and courses are actually arranged such that in your final years, you would have class from Monday to Thursday, and then Friday is reserved for internships or placements throughout the city. Our campus is within just a couple kilometers of downtown. We're on the main tram line of the city, so it is very feasible for you to enter the business environment and have that practical application of study while still maintaining a connection to the overall academic environment. That's also really important to us. Some universities might emphasize a sort of co-op model where a student is actually removed from the academic environment and solely pursuing a job, either part-time or full-time with a local company. For us, you have such a limited amount of time in your life to have that beneficial constant feedback with an academic and with professors. And so we prefer to have a model where you still have the ability to go to a job at least one day a week and then bring back your questions to your professor and sort of constantly be learning. Life on campus also ties a lot into life in the city of New Orleans. New Orleans, sort of known as the capital of the French colonial empire in the Western world, or in the Western Hemisphere. So the downtown area still has many structures dating from the 16 and 1700s, a very historic grid model, which is easily accessible for students, certainly for some of the businesses and internships, but also some of the other things that New Orleans is known for having more festivals than we do days in the academic year, for being the birthplace of jazz music, for being a really celebratory city in general, and a city that derives a lot of revenue from creative industries. So especially for students who are interested in seeing a creative application of a business degree or something within the sciences and creativity, New Orleans is a really wonderful place to see that come to life. I like to talk a little bit about our festivals, our history, and our culture. New Orleans is very well known as hosting probably the largest Mardi Gras in the world, quite different than the one hosted in Sydney. I did go to the one in Sydney just 2 weeks ago. It was a wonderful parade. We have at least 25 parades of that size. So Sydney had that one fun one, but there's a lot more going on there. The origins of Mardi Gras celebration and parades have a lot of their roots in both Greek and Roman mythology. So while it is a celebratory time, there are a lot of really interesting historic pieces that tie in. It was also legally the one time in the year, dating back to the 16 and 1700s, that you were legally able to wear a mask and conceal your identity. So especially during the French colonial era, when you can conceal your identity, it's the one time in the year when you can start to speak out politically. And so there are strong traditions of political satire in Mardi Gras as well. So there are some really well-known parades named after some of those gods of mythology. So Bacchus, the Roman god of wine, there's a really large parade celebrating Bacchus, but also a small offshoot of that that celebrates everything Star Wars and intergalactic called Chew Bacchus. So that is why you have so many Princess Leias on the screen here. And then another very large parade called Rex, Rex being the Latin word for king, and a small offshoot of that called T-Rex, so T-I-T being the French Creole or local Louisiana French word for little or small. That is a parade of floats about the size of this lectern, primarily pulled by dachshunds and other small terriers around the historic quarter. And so those are the sort of offbeat but creative and historically meaningful things that are infused into your curriculum on a weekly basis. I very much celebrate the history of the city and all aspects of it. And the university does a really good job of having that pepper in throughout the year, but that all students also take field trip based courses that get you off campus every week with a professor to learn more about the history and context of the city. 90% of our students are coming from outside of our state or outside of the US, the vast majority of them having to board a plane to come to our campus. So the university environment is very much all-encompassing. You join clubs, activities, literary societies, your classes take you off campus, and it really is a sort of 24-hour-a-day learning. Some examples of those off-campus courses you might take could be called the Art Market in Business, quite a popular one. For students interested in creative industries, but in a for-profit environment, you can see how a business functions, such as a gallery owner, an auctioneer, private collectors, independent artists themselves. How does that really function within the framework of the city? I'll wrap up for Tulane specifically to mention that we are highly competitive in terms of admission, and that's relevant as we sort of move on to the next part of the presentation to talk about application to US universities in general. And we are specifically talking about highly competitive institutions. So that top 100 to 200 institutions in the US, where they receive far more applications from qualified students than they have space. There will be some other universities where it's kind of a happy mix. Most students that apply are able to be admitted because they meet the sort of general academic parameters or expectations. But any of those household names that you're thinking of, from Harvard and Yale to Tulane and beyond, for example, we would receive about 30 to 40,000 applications in a given year for a first-year cohort of just 2,000 students. And so the US sort of takes a mindset that rather than nitpicking based on the student who got all A's and 1 A- and kicking them out and just picking the top, that we're looking for students who are stellar, right? They're at the top of their class, but it doesn't make much of a difference if you had all A's and 1 A- versus absolutely all A's. Your sort of academic ability is set, and then we're looking for a lot more subjective pieces than that. So Tulane has traditionally about a 10% acceptance rate. I think that definitely qualifies as highly competitive for admission. If you're looking at a university like Stanford, for example, if you pull out athletes and legacy from the admission process, it's probably closer to about a 1% acceptance rate, so just 1 out of 100. But not to fret, there are some things that you can do to make yourself best prepared for this process of applying to US institutions. So that's just another overview of campus. So let's talk just a little bit about what goes into an application file in general. What actually ends up on the desk of an admission officer or in an admission office? This is for highly competitive US institutions. The first and most important piece is always going to be a student's academic performance. So what does that mean? Academic performance is usually evaluated in the form of a student's transcript for years 9, 10, 11, and whatever we may have of year 12. Realistically, Americans, for the most part, are being admitted with just years 9 through 11, and maybe some preliminary or predicted grades for year 12, but we wouldn't even have any AP results or any final grades for Americans when we're evaluating them for admission. We're just doing this evaluation off of the years that we have. We're also going to evaluate in context with that transcript, because a student may have gotten near perfect performance, but what subjects did they actually choose to take? Yes, we're admitting you for all of the majors that we have, but if you totally eschewed all STEM subjects and some highly rigorous courses, then it's all of a sudden not as impressive. I think for the most part, universities like to see a solid mix of what we call core subjects. So a math, a science, an English and or writing, a foreign language, things like that are what we're most looking for to determine a student's academic ability. Standardized testing, if required. Most US institutions move to making the SAT, the standardized aptitude test, as well as the ACT optional for students applying to our universities. We're very slowly seeing some institutions move back to requiring or preferencing or acknowledging they will look at those tests just a little bit more. But in general, universities would say that we're making an academic evaluation of you in general. You get to pick what goes into that academic evaluation. If you would like for it to only be the marks that you've received in high school, fine, we'll do that. But if you would like for it to be a balance between standardized testing and the marks on your high school transcript, we can work with that too. Also going into an application often are going to be letters of recommendation, potentially a supplement that a university might require. And then the bulk of an application is usually what we call the Common App or the Common Application, which is one standardized application a student can fill out online, which gets the bulk of your biographic information, your CV, your activities, your writing sample, a small reflection. And you fill out one of those and it gets sent to all the universities that you would apply to in the US. Your average American student is probably applying to somewhere between 6 and 10 different universities. And so it would be that same essay, that same application file that goes to all those different institutions. Just some general tips. It always helps to start early. There's some standardization between US universities, but for the most part, these are private independent institutions or government/public state institutions, but we have 50 different states with 50 different sets of expectations. I think in some ways you're a little bit benefited by being in the opposite hemisphere, that you're mostly finished with your year 12 requirements by the time you'd start considering to apply to a US institution. Of any of the highly competitive institutions, they all have a start date somewhere near the end of August. And basically none of them would have a mid-year intake based on the Australian calendar. So for the most part, you're looking at starting in August. I find Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets or whatever brand you prefer to be a really great way to keep track of the universities you're considering and their variety of different deadlines. Being authentic is really important. Sometimes I'll describe US universities as these sort of attempts at a utopia. So universities are cherry picking individuals, their personality traits, their intellect, their interests, and bringing them to a residential environment that almost functions separate from the city or community around them. And we're not looking for students who are trying to be something. We are looking for students that are really good at being whatever it is they are. And so if you think there's a perfect recipe to be the ideal applicant and you attempt to be that, the competition is just so high that you're never going to be as good at it as the person who actually is that. So if you have a passion for collecting spoons more than anything else, let me tell you, we'd love to have a spoon collector in the class. And as much as we would also love to have a student who's passionate about data inputs and mathematic modeling for changes in migratory patterns of fish, that's great. Maybe that sounds more impressive than spoon collecting, but I promise you, the spoon collector is going to do a really bad job at impersonating that other student. So whatever it is you're passionate about, stick to it, be proud of it, and sort of let that shine through, because we're not looking to admit a group of carbon copies of each other. We're looking to admit a really interesting and diverse class of first-year students. I also think that Americans are stereotypically emotional, and that's okay, but you should know that, and that many of your peers who are applying to university as well will be very open about their experiences, their emotions, their interests, their passions, and they'll be a little bit vain too. I know there's a little bit of a tradition in Australia, you know, to not oversell yourself. You wouldn't want to get cut down for being too proud of yourself. The application process to the US is a time when it's very much okay to be proud of yourself and your achievements. Doesn't mean you need to print your application and put it all over your Instagram stories for everyone to see, but when you're in communication with the admission office, it's good to be proud of what you've done and not to undersell yourself. If you were the co-captain or co-president of a club, but you did most of the work, in your CV or in your essay, don't give too much credit to the other person. Be honest about what you've done, just because your competition will be doing the same thing. understand the bigger picture. Also understand that universities aren't granting crowns or little gems or treasures to students for their good work. Universities are serving their own interests. They're bringing in the right students that meet the communities that they need, the academic profile that they need, or maybe even a totally new department that's growing. They're going to bring in a student with that interest. And so just because people around you are getting more admission offers, or maybe some people aren't getting as many, it's not necessarily this qualitative mark on your record. Universities are doing what's right for them. And in any given year, that just might look like a different group of students. When you're thinking about academics, now some of you who might be year 10 or 11 in the room are probably starting to choose subjects. You may have more or less leeway in subject selection at your individual school. A university will never mark down or hold back a student for an opportunity that they did not have. So if you have the option to select a lot of courses, great. We have a higher expectation of you to select a group of courses that are meaningful to you, that you will excel in, and that you will be able to take the knowledge from and sort of put together some impressive work in your high school portfolio. If you're from a school that really is giving you no selection at all, you have a prescribed list of courses and you have to take that, that's also fine. That information on the limited optionality and selection you have will come through to us in your school profile, and you won't be held back for that. But you want to play to your strengths, right? Sometimes students will ask, what's better? Should I take an easier course and get an A, or should I take a harder course and get a B? Well, the real answer for highly selective institutions is you need to take the harder course and get an A. So that's not always the answer you want to hear, but students who are taking like a full breadth of really simple courses and doing really well in them and getting A's, for the most part, still aren't getting admitted to institutions. In admission committee, we have plenty of applications that come through of perfect performance with a really light amount of rigor in it. And that's almost the worst sign, right? Because a student has been presented with opportunities, theoretically, at their high school to move up, to push themselves harder. And they kind of said, nah, I just want to coast. I want to take it easy. And most universities aren't looking for that. That's not where you generate new information in research or the new vaccine for whatever virus is out there, right? It's about challenging yourself. But don't overburden yourself just because your parents really want you to do a subject that you have no knack for and no interest in. You probably will end up getting a C+ in that, and that also doesn't look good. So it has to be a balance of preparing yourself for the course that you're interested in, but also for a course that you'll do well at. We view AP, IB, A-levels, the Australian National Curriculum, dual enrollment, all of these sort of various different phrases for curricula. They're viewed equally rigorously. And so it's not about not having access to an IB curriculum. It's more about what you've been presented with and what you've been able to do with that. We oftentimes will talk about A-levels or the IB because it's super standardized and it's taken all around the world. So it's easy for us to talk about, but it doesn't mean that a student in IB is any more likely to be admitted than a student in an Australian National Curriculum or VCE or selecting from HR exams or that sort of thing. It is our job to meet you where you are. And if I receive an application with the national curriculum of PNG, like it's my job to spend an hour figuring out the level of rigor in course selection and scheduling a Zoom with the counselor to figure it out. So don't fret about that. There will rarely be minimums. I think it's so competitive in the US that, yeah, we need to know that you're pretty smart. But other than that, everything is a sort of weighed scale because you can have stellar writing, incredible involvement and leadership at your high school, and maybe have gotten a few more B's on there, and we're still really ready to take you. Whereas a student with the same academic performance, but sort of milquetoast involvement otherwise, won't be admitted. So there's just a lot of factors at play. We talked a little bit about testing already. English language proficiency. sometimes we are just at the behest of computer systems. And so as a non-US citizen, you might be asked to take something like the TOEFL or the IELTS. It's very much okay for you to reply to the admission office and say, do I have to take this? I'm, a fully fluent English speaker. And even if you're not native of a country who has English as a national language, so maybe you grew up in, or you were born in Indonesia, but spent all 4 years of high school here in Australia, you can ask for an exemption from some English testing because of that too. It's always fine to ask. There might just be a glitch in the computer system asking for you to take that. So you have some schools will be test optional, some schools will require a test, some will give you the flexibility. And then additional materials that go into the application. So thinking about letters of recommendation, we almost never receive a letter of recommendation that has anything negative in it. So we're starting to split hairs here, right? Everyone can find people that will say something nice about them, or I really hope you can, or you haven't done enough good in the world. It's not just about finding someone who can say something nice about you. It's about finding someone who can really help tie together your whole application. I'll often get the question about how we consider AI in the process and how students might be using ChatGPT to write an essay. It's a great question, but a really strong essay that doesn't necessarily match up with writing performance on a student's transcript or the commentary on their writing in a letter of recommendation or anything else, I start to know something's off. But you want your letter of recommendation to come from someone who knows you well, who can sort of help tie up the package in a really pretty bow and give that extra boost to everything you've already said about yourself. Avoid superfluous submission. We do say we'll look at pretty much anything you send, but we're not going to give you a ton of extra time. And so if you send me a nice concise package of the most meaningful information for you, I'll be able to review that in, let's be honest, it's just a couple of minutes, and be able to make a recommendation to the admission committee on your behalf. If you send in 9 letters of recommendation and examples of a research project and all these other things, I'm really going to have to scan all of it and not spend much time on it and risk missing the most meaningful parts of your application. So it's a challenge to keep it concise, but that's part of the process. It should be a challenge. So those are just some nice general pieces. Let's take some time now to go through some pieces of the Common Application. I'll give you some general suggestions and you'll see some examples of what students have done before. So if we're starting out by talking about the CV or your list of extracurricular activities, right? Less is more. You don't need to list that you go skiing 2 weeks a year, that you've taken a holiday to Europe or something like that. That's not necessarily meaningful to who you are. We're talking about long-term dedication and leadership roles that you may have had. Be careful when talking about things or experiences that you purchased rather than versus what you earned. I think it's wonderful if you were able to take part of your break time and go scrub turtles in Fiji. But I think there's probably a lot of turtles and other ugly reptiles in Australia that you could have scrubbed in some place less glamorous. So it's fine that you went and had that experience. I'm very happy for you, but you shouldn't expect an admission committee to be overly impressed by something that you bought into. So similarly, even like a US summer sports camp, I think there's a way to talk about that in what you learned and what you experienced. But if it was something extremely glamorous in Madison Square Garden in New York, like that's not the part that the admission committee is going to get excited about. Also keep in mind, most admission officers are not wildly rich and privileged themselves. So take everything with a grain of salt. Students can come across as out of touch pretty quickly. Get a job. I have to say that more in the US. I think most students in high school in Australia would probably be seeking or have some sort of summer employment, but you get really good perspective just by working a job. And honestly, that stands out way more than swimming with turtles. So here's just a couple of examples of what an application could look like and what not to do. So this is from an American applicant. So you see a lot of soccer listed here. You really only have 10 or 12 spots on the Common App to list your activities, and so do you really want it to be so one note, listing different aspects of this same soccer team that could be in one bar 5 different times? So I'd avoid that. I also suggest really putting your most meaningful and time dedicated activities towards the top. So you see here a little bit of fluff. By the time you get to the 4th activity, you might be tempted to turn to the next page. But oh wait, someone spends 51 weeks a year as a professional rodeo cowboy. Let me tell you, I got 1 spoon collector and I got 0 rodeo gurus. And so I'm looking to add a rodeo guru to the class. And so this is a sort of dedication and unique thing you'd be involved in that you'd want to put towards the top of your application. Explain what needs to be explained. We can't give you credit for time or dedication unless we understand what it is that you've done. Your activities don't all have to be traditional as well. If you spend a lot of time caring for a grandparent suffering from dementia or picking up a younger sibling from school or something like that, that's great too. List that. It's your time dedication. We want to know how you spend your time. If you list absolutely nothing or just one activity with maybe 1 hour a week on it, I'm assuming that you're eating Cheetos and watching TV the rest of the time. So you really should sort of account for the additional hours outside of the classroom. ACAM Club, I don't know what that is. I don't know what a CISVP is. If you spend a lot of time on it, 100 hours a week, I might start to view that with a grain of salt. So I'm not sure what that is. And then Meals on Wheels, that's just such like a surface level description there. There's so much more a student could do with that. And similarly, working as a busboy, I clean tables. Come on, there's a lot of other lessons that you gain by working in a restaurant. So if you were to do it the right way, ACAM is apparently the Academy of Creative Arts and Music. Great, love to see it. Now I can give you some credit for that. And a little bit more information about Meals on Wheels. Wow, 6,500 meals. That's a lot more helpful context than just imagining you may be showing up somewhere every once in a while and, you know, kicking around your feet a little bit. So that there's a right way and there's a sort of, not a wrong way, but a way to sell yourself short. And you want to make sure you're not selling yourself short. So to just talk a little bit about the essay or the personal statement. I'll go back to my phrasing that Americans are stereotypically emotional. And so I would encourage you not to think of it as an essay. An essay is what you might submit for a UK application, which stays very academic and very formal. Whereas a personal statement, I think, is what you're writing for the US system, which is supposed to be a lot more about you and almost, for me, after having read your CV and a few other things, I should be able to read your personal statement and almost feel like I've met you in person and we've had a cute chat and a cute catch up. And I have a sense of your personality more than anything. There can absolutely be pieces, of your academic success and research involvement and all of that. But you also kind of want to capture the heart of your reader. And you should know your reader, as I said before. Most admission officers that are reading your application for the first time are somewhere between 25 and 35. They're probably a graduate of the institution that you're applying to, and they probably don't go on holiday to Fiji. So yeah, you want to meet them where they are. You don't need to sound super advanced in your vocabulary or use a thesaurus. You should talk how you talk. You can use elevated terms if that's come to you in your research. But yeah, you should keep it somewhat colloquial, and that's definitely different than an expectation for the UCAS system in the UK. Yeah, look, we read 30,000 of these in a year, so there's probably no essay that I haven't read, and that doesn't mean that I think a repeat essay is bad, but I see a lot of essays that talk about that light switch or, I was lost and then I joined the netball team and now I am found. There's an okay way to do that essay, but we'll see a lot of those, and so it is harder to excel at an essay like that. The loss of a grandparent, that's understandably very traumatic for a young person. It's likely the first death that you've encountered. But a lot of people have lost grandparents, and it is just more difficult to be successful at an essay like that. I think there's a way to talk about what you gained and what you learned from your grandparent, but remember, this is about you. This isn't about the life that they led. And as harrowing as an experience as it might have been for them to, emigrate across the world, that's their story, and that's not your story. You want to make sure that you're telling your story. It doesn't all have to work out at 17, right? You're 17 and 18 years old. We don't expect the world from you, and that's okay. The more you can be yourself and sort of show us the potential that you have for engagement and learning and leadership can be the potential for that. It doesn't have to be the exact thing. I went through our database, the beauty of data nowadays, and looked through all 30,000 applications and filtered by different ratings for different parts of the application. We provide a narrative sort of review of a student's essay, but we also rank it from a 1 to 5. And of the 30,000 applications that we received this past year, less than 1% received a 5. And so if you do the math on that, that's less than 300 students. We have 2,000 students in the first year class. Plenty of students are getting in without having the most inspirational essay ever. And I think that's fine. You should not aim for that. You should aim for a strong essay that shows a bit of your personality, your strong writing style. And then if it happens to be the most inspiring in the world, great. But otherwise, most students are just showcasing a pretty good piece of writing that tells us you can come to our campus and learn more. Just a few things to sort of wrap up here. Many institutions will ask for an additional statement that they may call optional. I think it's just easiest to assume for the most part with US admissions, anything that's called optional is preferred, and you should do it. Most universities' singular optional request will be a short essay on why you're interested in that institution. Keep in mind, we're vain. We love students that love us, and we want to know why you're likely going to accept our offer of admission and why you would be a good fit at our institution. And so you might even want to plug in the question to ChatGPT, like, why do I want to attend Tulane University? See the results. And then that's a good barometer for you to know, okay, I need to go a lot deeper than this. Because there are plenty of surface level correct questions that would come through in ChatGPT. They pull basic stuff from our website. It would be a pretty good word vomit of basic stuff. The expectation is that we're going to learn a lot more about your personal connection to either subjects or extracurriculars, and that you would go a little bit beyond that. It's also entirely appropriate for you to be in contact with university representatives, email them, ask them questions, and it's most appropriate for students to do that, not their parents, because it is the student who we are hoping to admit. These are just a sort of, I think there's a few little funny things in here, to engage, but not to over-engage, and also remember that you are sort of being evaluated as an applicant and an adult here. So if you're going to ask questions, please just take it like a step beyond the basic that you could probably Google yourself. Yeah, so, do we have experiences? Yeah, what kind do you want? So be thoughtful in your communication. Be thoughtful in your email address. I mean, I don't know, bluntsforlife@yahoo.com. I think that it's probably just better to stick with your high school email, maybe better than anything. We do not review students' social media. We don't have time to go through that. That's not what we're doing, so don't over stress about that, but keep it professional, right? And if you're coming to a college fair or an interview or something like that, just be mindful a little bit of that. The over asker, oh my gosh, I'm just tired. Looking at that, that's more likely to get just like a delete from me, and then I can pretend that it went to spam rather than anything. So again, just being thoughtful, and then cutting and pasting, right? Like if you're asking the same thing to universities just to ask a question, it becomes pretty obvious to us. There are other way more meaningful questions to ask as you engage with university representatives. You know, what students fit in or don't fit in? What are some of the favorite professors or classes? Or even when you're talking to a student, we all have lists of current students that you can email and engage with, and you can just ask them, what did you do last night? It's a good way to get a sense for the overall environment at the school, because again, it is all enveloping. It's you don't go home at the end of the day to have dinner with your family. Like, you live there. This is your support network and your community. And then just some final thoughts. It will be fun and challenging. Universities, like the US government, change slowly, so we still do pretty much everything by email. It means you need to check your email. That way you don't miss dates for scholarships or anything else like that. Be open to a wide range of schools. There are 15 to 20 US universities that you've probably all heard of, but every other applicant has also heard of them, and so they get way more applications and are then that much more competitive to get into. So if you can actually take a few afternoons to do meaningful research into the programs that you're interested in, into the sort of societies and involvement and things like that, you'll find some really stellar schools that are going to set you up for success and might be a little bit easier to get into. Every single of those, top 100, 200 US institutions have connections to get you an internship on Wall Street or in the Center for Disease Control or anywhere in Washington with an NGO or with Bitcoin in California or whatever you want. Everyone's got really impressive alumni. It's the US. There are too many billionaires to count. And so we all have connections to those for you. You should just be open-minded to a lot of different institutions. There really are no bad schools. There's just sort of bad fits in general. And here's some sort of standardized deadlines. Early decision is that sort of binding decision, meaning that if you apply to our university and you're admitted, you are expected to withdraw your applications from all other institutions, and you basically promise that you are attending. We love students that love us, so you might have a 30 or 40% bump in the application process or likelihood of being admitted when you apply by early decision. Early action is a way to apply early and get a decision early. You can also apply regular decision, usually January 1st or January 15th for US institutions. And then you'll hear back by April 1st is pretty much the norm. And then you make a decision on if you're attending our university by May 1st. And then you'd start that following August. Yep. So we're going to transition to some quick questions before we wrap up.
So we haven't talked about US sports much tonight at all. What is really important is that you're doing two things in tandem. You want to make sure that you have the academic rigor fit and that you have the athletic fit. So you're talking to Paul and his team on one hand that you're going to have the academic rigor, but what happens is if you give your file to the coach is going to walk it down to Paul and going, hey, mate, I'm talking to a guy, he's a swimmer, can I keep on recruiting him? Here's his pre-read. And he's going to go, those grades aren't going to cut it here. You cannot recruit him. So what's going to happen is you need to match your rigor, okay? Sometimes your high rigor will get you into a selective institution like Tulane or some of the famous schools that we've talked about or any of the other selective schools, okay? So it's really important to understand the process, and I just wanted to interject about these timelines in particular. Yep. We love early action because it means they give you the offer by about December, and then you can sit there with your Australian offer and your American offer. But not all US colleges will do early action. So that's why that spreadsheet is important to start building, and it's never too early to start doing that. So sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify that for the audience. Thanks, Paul.
No, not at all. And I think that is most of the time we have for the program. Samantha, was there anything else that we may have glossed over, another note on athletics or anything like that we should wrap up with?
So everyone has registered today. I will send you out the after event email. If this is the first time you've ever come to our events, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's not a secret that I'm a student athlete specialist. I will send you our YouTube link. I ask you to look at the September session. The first 45 minutes is really going to reflect what Paul's been talking about. The last 45 minutes is going to talk all about athletics. But we'll be running another in-person session in about 6 to 8 weeks. We will advertise all those events on our Facebook page. So young people in the room, still like and follow our Facebook page. Just don't tell your friends that you're on Facebook. I won't tell them if you don't tell them. Because one of the things you need to decide as an athlete, if you're playing a team sport, it is a whole lot harder to be recruited because how good are you? And you need to teach coaches how good you are. So if you are not starting to connect with coaches in year 11 and you only start doing this in year 12, you may be too late because these coaches are watching these players for a long, long time. If you're playing a sport that is very measurable, tennis, you have a UTR. If you're a male in the room, you need about a 13 for a Division 1 college. If you're a female, you may get there for an 11. If you're a golfer in the room and you're a female, you may get to a Division 1 if you've got a 3 handicap. If you're a male, you need 0 + 1 + 2 + 3 to get probably an NCAA Division 1 program. If you play a sport that is measurable, you're a swimmer, your time is your time is your time. You're an athletic, a runner, your time is your time is your time, and it's very measurable. Please know that we have a lot of resources, we have a lot of information. Keep on coming to our sessions. If you're in year 12 and you have done nothing about the process yet, please know that you are late. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't catch up, but if you're applying for academic entry, I would use the Easter holidays as the time to really shortlist your colleges. Now, Paul has mentioned that the Common App becomes really important. The Common App has just released in the last 2 weeks that they're not changing the Common App prompts. They're remaining the same again for the last 3 years. So if you're in year 12, you can start drafting your Common App response now. And then you'll have a polished piece of writing that you need to use for your admissions. So there are ways that you can get ahead. We know we have mentioned a lot tonight. Tonight's session will be recorded. We will put it up on our YouTube channel. If this is the first time you've come tonight and you're going, oh my gosh, this is really hard, know that it's really hard for Americans. Know that the more you listen to sessions, listen to Paul's recording, listen to it again, it's going to make a lot more sense. If you are in the room and you're in year 9, we love you a lot because you can be working with us for a long, long time. If you're in year 12, again, that is okay. It's just important that you need to be very organised in the process. The other thing that I will say is that if you're in Australia, particularly in Melbourne, particularly in Victoria, COVID has slammed us. US universities know that COVID has slammed us. So it's probably not going to be unusual that you talk about how COVID has impacted you. So if your grades have had a little of a blip because of COVID, and that can be explained and supported by your school, and you are continuing to show upward progression now until you're graduating high school, then that still means you can have a competitive application. You need to understand that selective schools like Paul, is it your best fit? Maybe, maybe not. But also know that the academic rigor of those schools, Paul will say, you know what, we're not sure if this is your best fit. We would probably have you consider blah. So what's really important about admissions offers is making sure that you're involved with them. How do I find my best fit, Samantha? Well, what you do is you sign up to newsletters from US colleges that you like. They will send you continual newsletters. What you do is you go on their walking tours that they have on campus. You read their campus newspapers. You go to their virtual sessions that they are running. You actually have an understanding of the ethos. If you love research and you want to do research at an undergraduate level, then Tulane could be perfect. If that community social piece is something that you love and you happen to be one of the best jazz players of a saxophone, then Tulane could be perfect. But if you hate jazz and you don't like a small college where you are going to be under the magnifying glass with your professors, then perhaps Tulane is not the right fit. Okay, so it's about identifying that best fit, and our programs through the course of the year will continue to have you answering questions about how do you find your best fit. You know, you want to go to New York, that's great, but you hate the cold and the snow. Well, I don't know if New York's the best choice, all right, because are you going to be a very sad person if you happen to be in New York? And by the way, you hate a bustling CBD city. Then I'm like, really? New York, is that your best fit? But if you love urban and you love the city and you love the snow,
hey, New York should stay on your list. So it's about identifying that list, and then that list of 4,500 is easy to start knocking off, and then you have a smaller list. So we're going to open the microphone for a couple of minutes. We do hope you found this session helpful. Justin, if you've got any questions from your experience, come forward. I'm going to leave Paul with one more question. You made me a little bit nervous because I hear it in my office. Languages in the high school setting in Australia is not something that is possibly celebrated or really something that is focused on from a lot of students. If you're doing IB, you're very good in languages and you're very good in math, and that makes sense that you're doing IB. But a lot of students may drop languages at the end of year 9 in the Australian curriculum. And you have said Tulane and a lot of the highly selective see languages as really important. How will you review my application if I pick other academic rigor in my classes and languages is really not a big thing in the Australian curriculum?
Yeah, good question. And that is perfectly fine, especially as it's the norm in many schools. That would come through in your school profile, which lists student and class enrollment, the classes that are taken, the wide breadth of courses. So it becomes clear to us. We still highly value it in the terms of the education that we offer and in our graduates. So you will be required to take at least 2 semesters of a foreign language once you're on our campus. We teach 27 different foreign languages, so you'll be able to have your pick and learn something entirely new. But if you've been outside of a curriculum like the IB that would have that fully baked in, that's completely understandable. And especially in the international context, the lack of 1 or 2 courses is never going to preclude you from admissions, especially if you think about how prevalent the A-levels are around the world and that most students would take just 3 A-levels. You're not going to be able to meet a foreign language, a math, an English, a writing, and a lab science when you only take 3 courses for your final years of school. So that's acceptable. Please approach questions, throw a hand up, and we might just pass around the mic. Oh, great.
I don't know if this is for you or Samantha, but I know when you were talking about the academic grades, if you're doing IB, in year 11, you're graded according to a year 12 scale. Does that get taken into consideration, or how does that all impact on their academics?
Right. Yeah.
Moving forward?
Especially in the IB, we'll receive predicted grades from a school. And so we'll look at the MYP performance or IGCSE or whatever a student may have done for years 9 and 10. And then we'll look at the internal performance on 11 and then the predicted grades. And so it's understandable that sometimes a student's performance in 11 is a little bit lower than what their professors or teachers are predicting them to have in the end. And so we do put a decent amount of weight on the teacher's prediction. We had any other questions? We had maybe one just a step further up. Other questions, ma'am? Any questions? Oh, we've got one over here.
Just want to understand the financial aids, how relevant that to the international students?
Great, yeah, great question. So I'm remiss that I didn't talk about it more before. I think many US institutions have what seems like a very high sticker tag or price tag. So when you're looking at our assumption for tuition, fees, housing, meals, recreation activities, and all of that, most private institutions and many even public state institutions, it would be around 80 to 90,000 US dollars per year. But what's really important to keep in mind, and Tulane fits into that group, that about 77% of our students are receiving some form of financial support, and that the average package is about half the cost of tuition. And so while the price tag is seemingly very high and much more expensive than it might seem to stay local here in Australia, depending on the scholarship that you might receive for your academic performance, potentially athletic involvement, or one of the many different scholarships that just exist based on a prompt or an essay or a project, you may be receiving up to the full cost of tuition covered for you. The realities of the visa process in the US is that a US institution can only really admit you and help walk you through the process to secure a student visa if they've determined the amount your family can pay, combined with any available financial aid, adds up to that total cost of attendance. And so that's why sometimes a student's admission process might be delayed on a final answer until all of the scholarships and financial aid are accounted for. Most US institutions would be need aware in the application process. So your family would need to state an estimate of what they think they contribute to your application or to your admission fees. And then the university will evaluate your application. And if it's extremely impressive and you do have some financial need, well, then they'll just meet your financial need. Tulane University, which is a great school, but many of you may have not been so familiar before today, we have a $2 billion endowment. And so there's a lot of money to be spent towards certainly research, but also student support. And if you're going to bring that perspective, that intellect, that diversity to campus, we're more than happy to fund you. A great thing to keep on your Excel list or your spreadsheet is whether or not the universities you're applying to offer aid to international students. So some universities, for example, there are about 5 of them in the US that will meet the full demonstrated need, financial need of an international student, and will not even consider their financial need in the admission process. So basically they look at you, they say they like you, all of a sudden it turns out you need $90,000 a year, great, they're gonna give it to you. There are only 5 of those. Many other institutions will have some sort of in-between mix that, look, we're happy to fund you, and we might even give you the full $90,000, but you should be really, really impressive. You should be not just one of our general admits. You should go above and beyond. And most institutions will have, even on their website, what they offer to international students for financial aid. And then you can assume based on certain athletics as well for Division I that there's more likelihood for funding. And so all of this is how you move through the 3,500 different institutions. There are plenty of places that are going to offer aid. It just might not be all the places you've already heard of. Other questions?
Is it good to talk about your shortcomings within your personal essay?
Good question about your shortcomings in your personal essay. You are most welcome to address your own shortcomings, but I think with anything negative, it's always good to end on a positive note. And so if you're going to talk about areas that you need to grow or that you come up a little bit short at, find a way to put a positive spin on it in the end, more than anything. We'll see some of the shortcomings or deficiencies in an academic grade, and there's a place on the application for you to add an additional note as to maybe why you had that blip in performance, but otherwise focus on the positive. I think that's most of the time that we have, so I'm going to hand it back over to Justin for a goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. I would really encourage students who are seriously considering a pathway to the US to reach out to their school's career guidance counsellor or futures counsellor as early as possible. If not in year 11, then certainly before, and that way they can offer as much assistance as they potentially can. I know in my role and similar with colleagues in other schools, we don't like to do urgent. In fact, we don't do urgent. So the earlier you communicate, the better schools can actually help you in the preparation of that presentation. Now, I've been involved in this scene for a number of years now, but even tonight, I gained a whole new domain of knowledge that I certainly hadn't come across, and a little bit of insight into New Orleans and life in New Orleans and Tulane campus as well. I am certain that Paul and Samantha don't mind being contacted if you do have any further questions. I do want to thank Paul and Samantha for this evening. It has been a wonderful occasion, and if we could just show our appreciation once again for your input as well. And with that, we bring the evening to a close, and I wish you a lovely evening. Thank you.